The storm outside the glass-walled skyscraper restaurant cracked the sky open with white fire, as if heaven itself was furious, but nothing compared to the rage brewing inside. At the center table, surrounded by trembling assistants and horrified staff, billionaire tech mogul Adrian Wolf slammed his fist against the marble surface so hard that the wine glasses jumped. His voice, heavy and sharp like a blade slicing through silence, rolled across the entire dining area when he shouted for the third time, demanding someone with a brain, someone capable, someone who wasn't, in his words, utterly useless. Every employee froze, as if time had been captured mid-breath. What none of them knew was that help would come from a place no one expected. A quiet, exhausted waitress who had barely slept, who carried worries far heavier than the plates in her hands, and who would, in a single moment, shift the course of a billionaire's life forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected miracles, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. It helps us bring more stories that touch hearts. The waitress's name was Elena Reyes, a 26-year-old woman with soft determination etched into the lines beneath her eyes. She had taken an extra double shift because her little brother's surgery bills were months overdue, because her mother had lost her job, and because no matter how tired she was, she refused to let her family fall apart. The storm outside matched the one inside her chest, relentless, unyielding, loud with fear. She didn't want attention, didn't want trouble, didn't want to be anywhere near the boiling temper of a man like Adrian Wolf, whose name alone carried enough power to crush lives or build empires. But trouble had a strange way of finding those who least deserved it, and destiny had an even stranger way of hiding life-changing moments in the middle of chaos. The problem Adrian was facing wasn't a small matter. His company, Wolf Dynamics, was hours away from launching a global lifestyle tech integration device that investors had sunk billions into. But something had gone catastrophically wrong with the data navigation model, a malfunction that threatened not just the launch, but the reputation he had spent a lifetime carving out of sweat, brilliance, and brutal discipline. His top engineers were late because the storm had grounded their transport. His on-site technical staff couldn't identify the glitch, and his temper, fueled by pressure, fear, and pride, was spiraling into something impossible to contain. He didn't care who he scared, who he insulted, or who had to pay the price. All he cared about was fixing what he had built. All he cared about was control, and right now, he had none. Elena knew nothing about this device. She didn't understand the layers of artificial intelligence, spatial projection mapping, or interface calibration that powered it. But life had taught her something invaluable: the ability to read people, to sense tension, to see patterns where others only saw chaos. And as she stood behind the counter refilling cups and pretending not to notice the billionaire's fury, something in her gut told her that the problem wasn't just technical. It was something simpler, something overlooked by people too stressed to think clearly. She noticed that the prototype Adrian was fuming over, a sleek, curved device glowing faintly with blue indicators, kept shutting off every time he tapped the surface. She also noticed that one of the indicators blinked irregularly, not randomly, but in a rhythm that felt familiar. It was the same kind of blinking she saw when her brother's old tablet overheated and the power regulation chip failed to cool properly. She had watched hundreds of tech troubleshooting videos on YouTube over the years to fix their cheap gadgets because they could never afford repairs. That small, insignificant knowledge lived hidden in the back of her mind, until this moment when desperation forced her to step forward. Her heart thundered like the storm outside. As she approached the billionaire's table, her hands trembled, not from fear of him, but from fear of being wrong, fear of losing her job, fear of humiliation. But something inside her whispered that she had survived far worse than the anger of a man drowning in stress. She swallowed hard, took a slow breath, and leaned slightly closer, keeping her voice gentle but steady. What followed was like the pause between heartbeats, a moment suspended, fragile, uncertain. Adrian turned toward her as if she had insulted him merely by existing in his line of sight. His eyes, sharp as steel and cold as mountain frost, swept over her uniform, her apron, her tired posture, and dismissed her with the certainty of a man convinced that brilliance only lived in boardrooms and engineering labs. But Elena's voice didn't shake when she explained what she had observed. She spoke slowly, unassumingly, stating that the device wasn't malfunctioning at the software level. The blinking pattern indicated overheating and shutdown protection. The problem, she said carefully, might be nothing more than a blocked microvent or a misaligned cooling valve inside the prototype's casing. For a moment, silence swallowed the entire restaurant. The assistants stared, slack-jawed. The managers looked horrified. Adrian blinked once, twice, disbelief clouding his expression. But something about the clarity in Elena's explanation, the simple confidence, the unforced logic, forced him to inspect the device again. He picked it up, tipped it toward the light, and for the first time noticed the tiny obstruction lodged in the lower vent, a crumpled piece of protective tape left behind during assembly. No one had seen it. No one had thought to check something so small, so trivial. The billionaire's fury evaporated, replaced by stunned silence. And for the first time that night, the storm inside the restaurant softened. Adrian inhaled sharply, almost as if remembering how to breathe. His mind raced, recalculating everything. He wasn't just shocked that she was right. He was shocked that he, a man surrounded by experts, had overlooked something so basic. He tested the device again. It powered up perfectly. The interface glowed steadily, smoothly, flawlessly. The problem was solved.
Instantly, Elena stepped back, unsure of whether she should apologize or leave. She expected reprimands for interfering, maybe even termination. Instead, what she saw on Adrian's face was something she never imagined. A flicker of humility, respect, and a strange awareness that he might have misjudged someone who had far more capability than her uniform suggested. For a man who had built his life on believing that only the elite, the educated, the polished minds of the world deserved seats at his table, this moment shook him deeply. But the night didn't end there. The storm outside worsened, and the restaurant slowly emptied. Elena, exhausted and aching from hours on her feet, finally took her break in the back corridor, where she leaned against the wall and allowed her thoughts to unravel. She had fixed a billionaire's crisis, but her own life remained a mountain of unpaid bills, sleepless nights, and fears she could barely carry. Tears pressed at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to break. What she didn't know was that Adrian had been watching her discreetly from across the room. Something about her, her quiet courage, her simplicity, the strength hidden beneath gentleness, unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He approached her slowly, unsure of how to speak to someone whose presence had exposed his flaws and reminded him that brilliance didn't always come wrapped in prestige. He asked her gently about her background, her life, why she was working so tirelessly. And though she didn't mean to, the truth spilled out. The medical bills, the late notices, the crushing weight of being responsible for everyone she loved. She didn't seek pity. She didn't seek favor. She spoke because she was tired of pretending everything was fine. Adrian listened, really listened, something he rarely did with anyone. And suddenly, the billionaire who had spent years surrounded by wealth, influence, and power realized he had forgotten what real struggle looked like. He had forgotten what resilience looked like. Elena became a mirror, reflecting back the humanity he had lost along the way while chasing perfection, dominance, and success. By the time the storm finally began to fade, something in Adrian shifted permanently. He didn't offer charity. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered something far more valuable: opportunity. He asked Elena if she had ever considered working somewhere that recognized her mind instead of just her labor. She hesitated, stunned, frightened, hopeful. She barely believed she deserved such a chance, but the sincerity in Adrian's eyes told her this wasn't a handout. It was acknowledgement. In the following weeks, her life transformed. Adrian brought her into Wolf Dynamics as a junior systems assistant, a position she feared she wasn't qualified for, yet excelled in because of her natural intuition. She absorbed knowledge like oxygen. She worked harder than anyone, and Adrian, humbled by her brilliance, learned to speak softer, listen deeper, and recognize the humanity in every person he once dismissed. She became the grounding force he didn't know he needed, and he became the mentor she never thought she would find. Their lives, once galaxies apart, slowly aligned. She didn't change him overnight. She didn't soften his ambition or weaken his edge. Instead, she strengthened the part of him that had been buried beneath wealth and expectations, the part that remembered compassion, humility, gratitude. He taught her technology, innovation, strategy. She taught him patience, perspective, and the quiet power of seeing value in the overlooked. Months passed, and Elena's brother received the treatment he desperately needed. Her mother found stability again, and Elena herself blossomed into a force that surprised even the most seasoned experts in the company. Investors praised a new division Adrian built, one inspired by her ideas, structured around accessibility and user-friendly tech. Her story became an internal legend, whispered among employees as a reminder that brilliance lives everywhere, not just in corner offices and elite degrees. But most importantly, Adrian learned something that changed him forever. That intelligence is not defined by social status, wealth, or titles, but by the courage to use what you know, the humility to keep learning, and the heart to step forward even when you're terrified. As the sun set behind the skyline one evening, painting the city gold, Adrian stood beside Elena on the company rooftop. He told her quietly that meeting her had been the turning point of his life, the moment he realized that true greatness doesn't come from power, but from recognizing the worth in every human being. And Elena, emotional and overwhelmed, understood that she had not simply fixed a device that stormy night. She had fixed a broken part of a man who had forgotten what it meant to be human. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire and heal. Before the ending, please comment, "Kindness matters." And so, the billionaire who screamed for someone with a brain found someone with far more, a heart strong enough to change him, a mind brilliant enough to surprise him, and a spirit resilient enough to rise above everything the world tried to break. And the waitress who walked into work that stormy night with fear in her chest walked out weeks later with hope, dignity, opportunity, and a future brighter than she ever imagined.